It just seems to me that these questions that we've listed in these last two sessions are fair questions. They're not easy questions. And what we're saying in conclusion is that, my Christian brothers and sisters, we need to have some charity amongst people that would disagree with us about how to interpret Genesis 1, 2, and 3. If you were with us last time, we asked some hard questions for evolutionists. Today, we've got some hard questions for creationists. Because when we take a look at Genesis 1, 2, and 3, it's not easy for anyone trying to interpret exactly how to make this fit into the world around us. So today, Steve, we're going to go into some questions for people probably a little closer to home. And these are questions that I'm not sure everybody has thought through. That's why, again, we don't purport to have answers to all of these. We're just trying to purport that to be careful with the text, then it's not always easy.
Now, Glenn, you went through the questions for the evolutionists last time. This time it's going to be questions for the creationists. Why should our audience even care about these things? Why shouldn't they just go ahead and skip these two sessions and go right into Genesis 1:1? I've heard that before. Is how does this relate to me, and why should I even care about all of this?
The reason is because this whole issue of how science impacts the first part of Genesis causes people to walk away from the faith. There's people, well-meaning people within Christianity that present one particular view, and then when they bump into another one, people throw out their entire faith because of that. I've met, you've met, probably we've all met people that significantly struggle with these questions. I saw a well-meaning young earth creationist speak to a high school group, and over the course of a 45-minute lecture, first of all, he was giving the same old things that were talked about 40, 50, 60 years ago and weren't current. And secondly, over the course of 45 minutes, he called the people that teach evolution in universities, he called them ignorant, he called them liars, and he called them dishonest in those exact words. And that works with 16-year-olds. But 3 years later, when they're 19, 4 years later, when they're now in sophomore geology class or sophomore biology class, they find out these people aren't quite so ignorant after all. Actually, they're quite smart, and they're no more honest or dishonest than the average people in the population, including the people that lead churches. So there's honest, well-meaning evolutionists out there that are just looking at the data. But what we have to do is give people, okay, there's well-meaning Christians that have spent quite a long time thinking these things, and our faith doesn't rise or fall with the age of the earth. It just doesn't.
There are many Christians, I would count myself in that when you have challenges, we have a deep understanding and firm foundation in Scripture and our faith. And we have looked at these in the past, and we're not going to be swayed from our faith by them. But there are others that will be swayed by it. And having this knowledge, you'll be able to help other people who might be considering from walking away from their faith. There are three questions, and I want to give credit to a person by the name of Frank Turek with crossexamine.org to ask somebody when they come to you with certain questions or certain ideas that they have. The first question is, what do you mean by that? In order to get them to tell you what they mean and the idea, so that you'll have know what they're talking about. Then the second question is, how did you come to that conclusion? And let them give you the evidence that they say that formulated that idea. And then the third one is, well, have you considered? These questions, hard questions for creationists and also hard questions for evolutionists, those are the type of things that having knowledge of, when you have people that come to you and say, my professor said this, or another non-believer said this, and I'm not sure about my faith anymore. These are the have you considered type of things. By having the knowledge that you can help those people along. So while these things might not necessarily be something that for your particular faith, they are something to have a knowledge base, or at least a way to go back and listen to some of the things that we put forth here to help other people and other Christians that are being new Christians, especially that are being approached by these non-believers and skeptics and critics, to help them to answer the questions and to retain their faith.
I've just seen too many people walk away from the faith because of these kind of questions, and it doesn't have to be so. We will never answer all questions. We have an infinite God, and we have finite people, and finite people will never understand an infinite God. So one of the things we're trying to do with these 2 or 3, 4 sessions here at the beginning of Genesis is to tell our audience, any way you go with this, there's some deep questions, and you're going to have to wrestle with the text. And you're going to have to wrestle with some of the things in the world. It happens with all of this. One of the things that we're told, especially by our young earth brothers and sisters, is that if we look at Genesis 1, that we need to take the normal use of the language. And we're told that the word day, Hebrew word yom, in Hebrew means day. And evening and morning, the normal use of the word is a day, a 24-hour day. And I would agree. And if we view anything else, then we're bringing in information from outside. And one of the primary criticisms that gets, I think, unjustified criticism is that, if you go into science and you get information and bring it back to the text of Scripture, that's illegitimate, that you should instead start with the Scripture and then go interpret the science. And I submit, and I'm going to demonstrate why that's a flawed answer, because we all do the same things. We all have to have some things from the text and some things from the world to come to a conclusion about the text. And let me give an example to show that. There's many passages in the Old Testament that have language that we have to interpret. For example, Isaiah 55:12 says, "The mountains and the hills shall sing for joy, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands." With that, if we just take the text of Isaiah 55:12, mountain means mountain, hills mean hills, joy means joy, trees mean trees, clap means clap, and hands mean hands. Every word in the sentence means exactly what it says. But so how do we know that sentence is poetic and figurative and not literal? Well, the way we know is because we go out into the world and we look at a whole lot of mountains and hills, and we look at a whole lot of trees, and we say, golly gee whiz, I've looked at a whole lot of mountains and none of them sing like a human sings. And I've looked at every tree in the forest and not one of them has hands. And so therefore, this is poetic. I take the science that I did out in the world and I bring it back to the text, and I say it has to be figurative because the world around me, the science, if you will, tells me hills can't sing and trees don't have hands to clap. So therefore, it's using some sort of a figurative phrase that still has meaning. It's saying that creation is joyful. Same thing over in Genesis and every other passage for that matter. If we look at days in Genesis 1, we can't just say day means day and evening means evening, and I'm going to go interpret the world that way. We have to look at the world and say, does it fit? So everybody does that. Everybody takes what I meet in the world and what the text says and reasons through that to come to a conclusion. So just because it literally says day in Genesis 1 doesn't force us grammatically to be a literal 24-hour day.
Now, you're not taking out, Glenn, that it could mean a literal 24-hour day. The point I think you're making is that there's some that say emphatically it has to be a 24-hour day without any other type of answer or reason behind it. That's the kind of the point you're taking is, right?
Correct. From the text, it could be a literal 24-hour day. What I'm specifically refuting is this idea that's repeated over and over, is that you can't go out into the world and make observations based on science and bring it back to the text and use that as a tool for interpreting the text. That's what I'm saying.